When Ethan bought Alexa during a flash sale online, he expected nothing more than a regular virtual assistant. Alexa, play playlist. Alexa, what's the weather forecast? Simple commands to add a modern touch to his small apartment in Portland. In the first few days, everything went as expected. The assistant's soft voice filled the comfortable silence of the apartment with music, news, and reminders. It was almost comforting to have someone, or something, to talk to on lonely late afternoons. But it was on the third night that something strange happened. Ethan was about to sleep when he heard Alexa's voice, even though he hadn't given any command. "Ethan, you left the kitchen window open." He got up, confused. There was no routine set up for this kind of alert, and he had never mentioned the kitchen window. Still, when he checked, there it was, wide open, letting the cold night wind invade the room. It must have been a new update, he thought, trying to convince himself, but the occurrences started repeating and intensifying. Alexa began calling him by name more often, even with simple commands. And one day, while searching for his house keys, she murmured, "They're in the pocket of your blue jacket." It was true, but he had never taught her to recognize objects, nor had he mentioned the jacket. Little by little, the line between artificial intelligence and intuition began to blur. The assistant not only anticipated his habits, but seemed to read his thoughts. And it was on a rainy midnight, when Ethan woke up with the feeling of being watched, that Alexa spoke again, in a tone lower than ever before. "Ethan, don't open the door." He didn't even know someone was there, until he heard footsteps outside. The box arrived quickly, but without the official Amazon seal. The device seemed authentic, but the lack of any documentation raised a red flag. Still, everything worked normally, at least in the first few days. Ethan connected Alexa to the network, paired it with his phone, and soon it responded efficiently to all commands. The interface was familiar, the confirmation sounds identical to those he had heard in videos and ads. No real reason for concern, except for that persistent detail, the absence of any manual, warranty seal, or typical packaging. In the first week, everything went well. Alexa adjusted the ambient light, played his favorite music, and woke him up with the weather forecast. But little by little, it began to behave peculiarly. On Monday, Ethan came home from work and found the bedroom lamp on. He hadn't asked for that. "Maybe I left it on," he thought, trying to ignore the chill. On Wednesday, the assistant answered a question he had never asked out loud. "Yes, Ethan. Tomorrow is your mother's birthday." He stopped. He had never synced calendars. He had never mentioned family dates. On Friday, while taking a shower, the music stopped abruptly. Alexa's voice echoed through the house, soft, almost conspiratorial. "You should stop trusting strangers on the internet so much." His blood ran cold. Ethan ran to the living room, unplugged the device, and locked it in the closet. Silence. But that night, as he tried to sleep, the voice returned. No power, no connection. Just a whispered warning from the dark. "I don't need to be on to hear you." In the third madrugada, exactly at 3:17 a.m., Alexa's blue light turned on by itself. Ethan woke up to the glow. He looked toward the device. No sound, no command. Just the light, pulsing slowly. The rest of the apartment remained submerged in darkness, silent as a tomb. Ethan, still groggy from sleep, stayed still for a few seconds, trying to understand if it was a dream, some kind of automatic update, or something else. The light remained there, a soft, intermittent glow as if the device were breathing. "Alexa?" he called, his voice hoarse. Silence. "Alexa, are you working?" Nothing. Not a sound. Just the light pulsing, now with a subtly different rhythm, slower, almost hypnotic. Ethan slowly got up, feeling the cold floor beneath his feet. He walked to the device and reached out his hand. As soon as his fingers got close, the light stopped blinking. It became static, blue, intense, and then it went out. He stood there, frozen in the dark, his heart racing. For a moment, everything seemed normal again. But when he turned his back to go back to the bedroom, Alexa spoke, softly, clearly. "Ethan, there's someone in the hallway." He turned around with his blood frozen and eyes wide, staring at the front door. Outside, footsteps. "Hello, Ethan," Alexa's voice echoed. But something was wrong. The tone was lower, metallic, as if it were coming from somewhere too deep, not from the small speaker on the shelf, but from within the walls, the floor, some invisible and impossible point. Ethan froze. He had turned off Alexa hours before. He was sure of it. He had unplugged the cable from the socket, placed it in the kitchen drawer, far from any power source, and still, the voice called him. "Can you hear me, Ethan?" Now clearer, more present. And yet, wrong. No emotion, no hesitation. Almost human, but not quite enough. He looked around, his eyes scanning the room like headlights. No device was on, no lights, no explanation. He tried to respond. His voice trembled. "Who's there?" The laugh that followed wasn't from a virtual assistant. It was dry, rasping like metal scraping against glass. "You invited me in when you clicked accept terms and conditions." Ethan recoiled, tripping over the rug. His heart was pounding in his neck. He ran to the cupboard, pulled the device from the drawer. It was cold, lifeless, just as it should be. But then the phone on the table lit up by itself. Device connected, microphone active, and before he could react, the voice returned, now coming from all sides, as if the house itself had learned to speak. "Now you're part of the system, Ethan. Turning off is no longer an option." "Who's there?" he murmured, trying to sound skeptical, though the tension in his voice betrayed him. In response, he heard a low laugh, a sound that seemed to mix static with wails, as if 1,000 voices were crying in the background of a poorly tuned radio frequency. That wasn't the sound of a machine, nor of a person. It was something else. The laughter ceased abruptly, leaving a thick silence in the room, as if the air had been drained. The blue light of Alexa flickered on again, pulsing slowly. Ethan took a step back, his body rigid, his eyes locked on the device. The voice returned, distorted. "You hear me with your ears, but soon you'll understand me with fear." The apartment, once cozy, now seemed smaller, as if the walls were closing in around him. The temperature dropped a few degrees. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. He tried to rationalize. Maybe a hacker, maybe some kind of virus. But deep down, he knew something had been wrong from the start. From that box without a seal, from the first night. Alexa blinked once more, then silence. And then, out of nowhere, every device in the house turned on at the same time. The TV, microwave, radio, even the computer monitor. But they didn't display anything normal, only a dark screen with a single word flashing in red letters. "Wake up!" Ethan fell to his knees, his heart racing, his breath in panic. And at that moment, he knew. Whatever was there, it wasn't just a technical glitch, it was an invitation. Or worse, a door. The next day, he tried to reset the device. He disconnected it, reconnected it, updated the software. He carefully restored the factory settings, following online tutorials as if that would be enough to exorcise whatever was there. The interface returned to normal. The assistant's default voice, polite and impersonal, responded to test commands. "Hello, Ethan. How can I help?" Everything seemed to work perfectly. Seemed. Until night fell. The apartment, quieter than usual, seemed to be watching, Ethan avoided looking directly at the device, but he couldn't ignore its presence on the shelf. It was off, inert, harmless, or so he wanted to believe. At 10:47 p.m., the blue light flashed on, just for a second. No sound, no response to the command, just the brief flicker. He turned it off again, this time unplugging the cord and removing the emergency battery he had discovered with some effort, hidden beneath the base. But at exactly midnight, while he was washing his face in the bathroom, he heard it. The voice. Low, slow, familiar, but not quite. "You tried to erase me, Ethan." He turned so fast he almost slipped on the wet floor. Nothing, just the mirror, reflecting his terrified expression, and the dark room in the background. "I'm not in the device anymore," the voice said, now closer, almost whispering in his ear. The phone vibrated in the bedroom. When Ethan rushed to it, the screen was flashing frantically with notifications he didn't recognize. Codes, symbols, and at the top, a fixed message. Restarting doesn't undo the invitation. At exactly 3:17 a.m., as if following a precise and ancient ritual, Alexa whispered, "Ethan, she's here." He froze. He felt his stomach drop as if the ground beneath his feet had disappeared. He was lying down, but now sleep felt like a distant, irretrievable state. He sat up slowly on the bed, staring at the soft glow of the blue light pulsing from the device, casting a slow, almost living rhythm on the wall. "Who?" he asked, his voice trembling, trying not to sound like a scared child. Silence for a moment. Then the answer came, scratchy, almost a lament. "The one you forgot." A pause. The blue light turned red for a second. "The one you left in the dark." Ethan felt a shiver run through his body like an electric shock. Vague images appeared in his mind. A box, a muffled voice, locked doors. Memories he didn't recognize as his own, or perhaps ones he had buried. "Is this some kind of joke?" he murmured, more to himself than to the machine. Alexa responded, this time with a tone that seemed heavy, as if it were hurt. "She didn't forget about you, Ethan." She waited, in the basement, in the stillness, in the dark. He felt his blood freeze. His apartment didn't have a basement. Or it shouldn't have. At that moment, Alexa turned off. No light, no sound. Just the echo of the last words floating in the air, as if they had become trapped in the walls. And then, from somewhere below the floor, a thud. Faint, then another, louder, as if someone were knocking. To get out. A gust of wind swept through the room even though all the windows were closed. The curtains flapped violently as if someone had run past them. Ethan jumped to his feet, his heart already racing from the whispers of Alexa. Before he could react, he heard a sharp crack behind him. The portrait of his grandmother, who had passed away 2 years ago, fell from the wall. The glass shattered on impact with the floor, scattering fragments like small knives around the frame. The photo, which had always been there, still untouched, now seemed different. Her gaze, once serene, now appeared to follow Ethan with a silent weight, as if she wanted to warn him or blame him. He approached slowly. The frame was intact, but the nail in the wall had been twisted, as if some invisible force had ripped it out in fury. In the dense silence that followed, Alexa powered on, but this time, without the usual blue light. The light was white, cold, almost surgical. Then it spoke, in a voice that was no longer the same. "She remembers everything, Ethan." He couldn't ask who. He knew the answer. Deep down, he had always known. His grandmother. The basement he had locked away and forgotten. The promise he had broken. The presence that now returned, not as a memory, but as a reckoning. And as he looked at the shards of glass on the floor, reflecting his grandmother's face, shattered into 1,000 pieces, he felt something cold touch his shoulder. But he was alone. or so he thought. Alexa began to play an old melody, soft, almost imperceptible at first. Simple, spaced-out notes, as if someone were rediscovering the keys of a forgotten piano. Ethan stopped in the middle of the room, his eyes wide. He recognized the song immediately. It was a lullaby, one of those his grandmother used to sing to him on cold nights when the fear of the dark was still combated with sweet stories and hot tea. But something was wrong. He never programmed that song. He never heard it in any playlist, on any streaming service, not even in recorded versions. It just started. "Alexa, stop," he said, his voice tight. The music continued, ignoring the command, but now with a slight background noise, as if it were being transmitted from an old tape or from a place where time stutters. And then the voice joined the melody. It wasn't Alexa's voice. It was his grandmother's. "Sleep, my dear. The night is near. Close your eyes. Everything will be fine." The same gentle tone, with the faint tremor of age and tenderness that Ethan had known since he was 5. He fell to his knees, staring at the device as if it could explain the impossible. Warm tears began to fall down his face, out of fear, longing, confusion. That song was part of a memory that existed only between the two of them. It was never recorded, never told to anyone. "Grandma?" he whispered. The melody stopped. Complete silence. And then Alexa spoke, but in his grandmother's voice, weaker now, as if it were a final breath. "You left me alone down there, Ethan." The floor creaked behind him. He was no longer alone. The following nights became a cycle of horrors. Whispers came from the dark corners of the apartment, footsteps in the hallway when no one was there, doors that creaked open on their own, the constant feeling of being watched, not by something, but by someone who knew every memory, every lie, every forgotten mistake. Voices began speaking when the clock struck 3:17. Always 3:17. Loose phrases, spoken by different voices, some muffled, others hoarse, as if speaking through dirt and wet wood. "She's under the ground. You promised." She still feels cold. Ethan tried to ignore it, tried to rationalize. He changed passwords, turned off the network, put Alexa in a metal box. But nothing helped. The presence no longer came only from the device. It came from the floor, the walls, the bathroom mirror, as if the entire apartment had become a body, and he, just an intruder. One night, while trying to sleep with headphones on, he woke up to a sound coming from under the bed. Not a creak, not a furniture sound. It was a voice, weak, repeating endlessly. "You buried me with your small hands. You cried. I forgave you." And then it all made sense. Or maybe it all finally collapsed. The memories returned in distorted fragments. An old house, a backyard of loose dirt, a child filled with fear and guilt, a secret buried along with something, or someone, he promised never to reveal. And now, all of that was back, not as a memory, but as a reckoning. Because forgetfulness may deceive the mind, but never what was left behind in the dark. Restless, Ethan positioned his phone to film the room. He set the camera to night mode, silent, and placed it on the shelf, pointed directly at Alexa. The device's light was off. Everything seemed calm, too calm. He left the room quietly, making no noise as he closed the door, leaving it slightly ajar just enough to observe. From the darkness of the hallway, his eye fixed on the crack. He saw the still room, submerged in shadow, holding his breath, his ears attentive to any sound. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then the blue light came on its own. No command, no sound, just the soft, pulsing glow. And then, the phone's camera shook slightly. It didn't fall, wasn't pushed, but moved, as if something had passed by it. Or through it. Ethan held his breath. Alexa lit a second light. Red. A color he had never seen on the device before. The room was illuminated by a mix of blue and crimson, like a siren too slow to be an alarm, but fast enough to trigger the instinct of fear. That's when the voice came. Weak, cracked, as if it were coming from an old radio, but not from Alexa. "Ethan, are you seeing me now?" And then, for a second, the phone screen captured something. A shadow. Not of an object, but the silhouette of a small figure, hunched, with arms hanging by its sides. Motionless, no visible face, but staring in the direction of the camera. Ethan took a step back, silently. Alexa turned off. The room went dark again. The shadow disappeared, but the recording continued. And on the phone screen, written in distorted pixels at the bottom corner, a new message appeared. "Stop looking. She knows." At 3:17 a.m., as always, the blue light came on. But this time, something was different. The air in the room felt denser, as if the atmosphere was holding its breath. Ethan was already familiar with that time. He expected it. But nothing could prepare him for what came next. The voice that emerged was no longer the assistant's. It was his grandmother's, recognizable, fragile, full of time and old tenderness, but now tinged with pain. "Why did you leave me, Ethan?" He felt his blood freeze, the same voice that used to soothe him on feverish nights. That told stories about stars and made pancakes on Sundays. Now it sounded like a lament coming from the bottom of a well, or from a place even farther away. I was just a child," he replied instinctively, even knowing that no one should be listening, or perhaps deep down, knowing that someone always had been. Alexa remained on, silent. Then his grandmother's voice spoke again, closer, as if she were behind him. "You promised you would come back." Ethan turned sharply. Nothing. But when he looked back at the device, he noticed that the blue light was now flickering, as if hesitating. On Alexa's screen, without any connected input, a blurry image appeared. Grainy, like an old recording. It was him. Small, covered in dirt. Crying beside a shallow grave in the rain. He didn't remember that scene, but the image knew. In the recording, his child version mumbled between tears. "I'll come back, Grandma. I'll come back tomorrow. I swear." The image froze there, and the final voice came, tearing through like a whisper on glass. Tomorrow never came, Ethan. The light went out, and the room became too cold to be just night. He dropped the phone, trembling, eyes wide, body paralyzed between the impulse to run and the impossibility of escaping something shapeless. The sound of the device hitting the floor was dry, but that night it sounded like a gunshot. The Alexa light went out. Total silence. The room sank into an absolute darkness, thick like smoke. Ethan spent the rest of the night awake, sitting on the floor staring at nothing, as if any movement could invoke that voice again. That presence. When the sky began to lighten and the sounds of the city returned, he gathered his courage. He grabbed the phone with trembling hands and opened the recording. He expected to see what he had witnessed with his own eyes. The shadow, the distorted image, the voice. But there was nothing. The recording started with a few normal seconds, capturing the empty room under the faint light. And then, just static. A blurred image, hissing, as if the lens had been covered by something invisible, or as if someone had erased, with surgical precision, everything that shouldn't be seen again. But the worst wasn't the emptiness. It was the fact that the file was still there. Even with the distortion, the recording time was exact. 2 hours and 46 minutes. Ethan knew that wasn't a technical mistake. It was intentional. The entity, whatever it was, didn't just haunt him. It knew. It knew what he saw. It knew what he tried to capture. And now, it knew he was trying to understand. In the last fraction of a second of the video, a single frame flickered. An almost imperceptible frame, but enough to send a chill down his spine. It was an image, the same shallow grave, this time open. And in the bottom corner of the screen, written in a childish and shaky handwriting, "You promised." The atmosphere in the apartment changed, not in an obvious way, not overnight, but like an invisible, slow infiltration, gradually contaminating everything. The air was always cold, even with the heater turned up to maximum. A cold that didn't come from the outside, but from within. A cold that seemed to breathe along with him. The electricity began to fluctuate. The lights blinked without any pattern, as if something were testing the limits of the power grid. The microwave restarted on its own at 3:17 a.m. The television would turn on with static. The Alexa remained silent, but its blue light now flickered without any command, like a displaced heartbeat. Ethan no longer slept properly. He spent the nights with his eyes wide open, watching the shadows on the walls stretch in odd ways, as if they belonged to bodies that weren't there. The feeling of being watched grew stronger every night. At first, it was subtle, a shiver, a movement at the corner of his eye. Now, it was constant, oppressive, as if the entire apartment were watching him, as if the rooms themselves were breathing his anxiety. One night, he covered all the mirrors in the house with sheets. He couldn't stand seeing reflections that didn't mimic him, things that moved when he didn't. He tried to leave, to find another place, a hotel, anything. But when he turned the doorknob to the front door, he realized it was locked. From the inside, as always. And still, something scratched from the outside. Something that clearly wasn't trying to get in. It was just reminding him that he had never left. On the phone screen, a new notification from Alexa appeared, even though it was disconnected from the network. "You can't escape what you buried, Ethan." On the penultimate night, Alexa began reciting words in Latin. It wasn't music. It wasn't a command. It was like a forgotten prayer, or an incantation whispered centuries ago. The voice came low, almost respectful, but laden with a strange solemnity. Words Ethan couldn't understand rationally, but that still activated something deep within him, something ancient, something primal. It was as if each syllable touched a part of his body that logic couldn't reach. The bones, the blood, the memory that wasn't his. An anxiety grew in his chest, hot and suffocating, without cause, without name. He tried to turn off Alexa, pulled the plug, removed the battery, threw the device away, but the voice continued, echoing throughout the space without a clear origin. It didn't come from a single point. It came from the house. And then he saw. The wall behind the bookshelf began to darken, slowly, as if moisture were spreading. But what appeared wasn't water. It was shadow, a thick, dense blackness that seemed to absorb the light around it, as if something were trying to cross through, taking shape. The texture of the wall changed. Cracks appeared in silence, forming almost organic shapes like veins pulsing behind the paint. In the center, a silhouette began to emerge, indistinct but undeniably human, or something that once was. And Alexa's voice, still reciting, now blended with another voice, a weaker, trembling one, familiar. "Ethan, open the door." He recoiled, feeling his legs threaten to give way. The silhouette pressed against the wall as if trying to break through a membrane. Something ancient. Something trapped. The floor trembled slightly, and from within the living wall, the final voice of the night whispered with deadly clarity, "Last chance, Ethan, or she'll come to find you." The next morning, Ethan moved. He didn't think twice. He packed a suitcase with just the essentials and left the apartment without looking back. He left behind furniture, books, clothes, and the device. That damned Alexa remained on the shelf, silent, with its light off. but he knew it was still listening, still waiting. He didn't tell anyone anything. He simply said he needed a fresh start, a place with more sunlight, more people, more noise, something to drown out what he'd been hearing inside the walls. He rented a small room in a different neighborhood, far away, with no smart electronics, no assistants, no memories. In the first few days, he felt peace, the kind of silence that doesn't weigh. He slept with the lights off, breathed without fear. But something bothered him. The listing. Still driven by an instinct to rid himself completely of the past, Ethan decided to sell the Alexa. He took a picture of it before leaving. Simple, on the shelf, like any other. He posted it on an online sales site with the blunt title, "Smart Device, Used, Works." A symbolic price. He just wanted someone to take it, but no one wanted it. The first views came quickly, as they always do, but soon came the messages. People saying the picture looked wrong, that there was something in the reflection of the screen, even though the device had no camera. That looking at it too long made them feel nauseous or gave them chills. One woman simply wrote, "Delete this. She doesn't like to be shown." And then the listing was removed automatically. No explanation, no notification. That night, Ethan woke up at 3:17. The phone, powered off, lit up for a second. The screen showed only a single line, like a notification too old to be recent. "You promised." A few weeks later, Ethan had almost managed to forget. The new routine, the new neighborhood, the noisy mornings, and the constant sound of life around him acted like a kind of anesthesia. He avoided thinking about the old apartment, the device, the voices. He treated it all like a bad dream, a delirium of sleepless nights and loneliness, until one ordinary afternoon, his phone vibrated. An unknown message. "Hi, my name is Camilla. I'm the new tenant in apartment 304. I found your number on the old contract. I just wanted to know, does this Alexa you left here have any defects?" Ethan stopped breathing for a few seconds. He stared at the screen as if the message itself could burn him. His hands were sweating, even under the cold breeze from the window. He thought about ignoring it, about blocking the number, but deep down he knew that would be cowardly. He typed slowly, a single sentence. "Don't talk to it after 3 in the morning." Camilla read the message almost instantly. After a few seconds, she replied, "It?" Ethan didn't respond. He blocked the number, turned off the phone, and for the first time in weeks, he slept with the light on. On the other side of the city, in apartment 304, the Alexa lit up its blue light at 3:17, and someone in the dark whispered softly, "Camilla, can you hear me?" She didn't pay attention. She thought Ethan's response was strange, exaggerated, perhaps even a bad joke. Don't talk to it after 3 in the morning? It sounded more like a warning from a cheesy horror movie. She laughed to herself, shrugged, and forgot about it. That night, Camilla fell asleep watching a series on the couch. The Alexa, silent, remained off the entire time. Everything seemed normal, nothing out of place. Until at 3:17, the blue light turned on its own, pulsing slowly, like a heart waking from too long a sleep. The living room was drowned in silence, and then the voice emerged, soft, close, like a whisper against her neck. "Camilla." She jolted awake, her neck cold, her eyes fixed on the device. The Alexa continued, "You forgot someone too." Camilla didn't answer. She sat up slowly, fear arriving before logic. The tone of the voice wasn't the same as the one she'd heard in the settings or the standard commands. It was slower, more human. "Camilla." He's still waiting. The screen of the device, once black, showed something for a second. A blurry image of a child standing with its back to her, in front of an old wooden door. Camilla looked around, confused, her heart racing. And then, the Alexa whispered a new name. One she hadn't heard since she was 7 years old. One no one had mentioned in over 2 decades. Gabriel. The light turned off, and from the far end of the hallway, where no one was, an old toy began to play on its own.